Hi, hope you're doing well. What I plan to talk about in this poetry talk is intertextuality. And it's a word that might sound complicated to some, and I didn't know what it meant before I learned what it meant, or at least what it means to me. But I hope it's one that will be helpful to others like it has been to me. And for me, it comes down to something pretty simple. It's led to a pretty simple tool or set of tools for my poetry. And this term came to me at least partly through the writing of a literary theorist, or cultural theorist, named Roland Barthes. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right. It's Barthes. And he wrote about any text or piece of writing or piece of film or music or any other kind of media, I believe. Any text being the text between of another text. And what I take that to mean is that to him, any, I'm just going to say poem because that's what I'm focusing on in these talks. Any poem is helping and probably going to help another poem to happen. Somebody's going to read it, and if that doesn't influence them to write it, they might tell somebody else about it, and that other person might write one. Somewhere along the line, it might lead to another poem. And don't tell Roland I said any of this, because it might be way off from what he was trying to say. But that's just kind of what it means to me, or what his words mean to me, that any poem is, it comes from other poems, and other poems are going to come from it. And that really started to make an impression on me, really before I knew that it was intertextuality, in a book called The Master Letters by the poet Lucie Brock-Broido. And in her poems, in that book, or in some of them, she included quotes by Emily Dickinson, maybe more than anybody else, and then other poets too, Shakespeare, Sir Thomas Wyatt, and maybe lots of others. And some of them are in italics, and the poems are sort of fragmentary. They have a lot of different parts that, they sort of fit together, but not quite, in my reading of them, so that for me it's easy to look at her poems and see other people's writing in them, which I believe is something she did on purpose. And that really was kind of eye-opening for me, because I had this idea that the poet was a sort of isolated figure who drew pieces of writing up from someplace deep, inaccessible to anybody else, and that it was a very solitary thing to do. And it can be, maybe. If it's that way for you, that's great. Maybe it's been that way for me sometimes. But I was helped through Lucie Brock-Broido's use of intertextuality to see that writing can really be a pretty social thing. That when I write poetry, I can really set out to try to write drawing on the work of other poets that that I love, that's helpful to me, or just that, that kind of somehow fits with the poetry that I'm going for. And when I was in the PhD program that I got to be in at Mizzou, I found that there was another writer who did this really clearly. That was Shakespeare. And I didn't know how many things in his plays were actually written by other people. Like maybe all of the songs, and how many things were, imitating other poets, and in other ways drawing on other poets, and in ways that maybe many people at the time could see. Like Christopher Marlowe. There was at least one passage in a Shakespeare play very clearly, when it was pointed out to me in Harold Bloom's writing, The Anxiety of Influence, very clearly is drawing on what Marlowe did with a character. One of Marlowe's characters was talking about how evil he was, basically, and Shakespeare had a character that was like, this is how evil I am. And it was like this much more evil than Marlowe's character. So it was kind of like maybe a competitive thing, but, I believe it was something where anybody who was kind of familiar with maybe theater in that day could say, hey, that's Marlowe right there. And definitely Shakespeare drew on Ovid, like in The Tempest, that speech by Prospero that I love. Oh, really love it, where it's his retirement speech. He's saying this rough magic I here abjure, if I remember right, and talks about, I'm going to drown my book, his book, that the source of his magic, he's going to drown it, he's going to let it go. And in that speech, Shakespeare really drew on Ovid, on Golding's translation of Ovid, and there again, it's really pretty clear. So I found that to start to be a really helpful thing to try. Like, let's say I hit a point in a poem where I didn't know what to write. Like there's a sonnet that maybe it's best that I can't find it. It wasn't, I don't know if it was good or not. I never know when a poem's good or not, but it was just kind of an experiment, and it was in the voice of Andy Warhol, and I didn't know how to end it, and I remembered, hey, I can take this line from Midsummer Night's Dream from Shakespeare, and just cut a little part out of it and repeat it a bunch of times, and it'd be like what Andy Warhol did with pop art. And it was really fun to try, and it was really, okay, there's Shakespeare right there in the poem. And that ended up really helping to produce a whole book of poems for me, or book-length manuscript. Hopefully it'll find a good home before too long, home that's right for it, a publisher. Because I started trying to write poems that were drawing on the story, the voice, the contributions of Vivian Eliot, the wife of T.S. Eliot, the poet. And I really don't remember what led to that as something for me to really run with, like other poetry projects for me. And it just seemed to come out of nowhere, maybe by grace. And I started to find writing that this voice, it wasn't really the historical Vivian Eliot's voice. She had her own voice. that that definitely, she made contributions through. But it was a character sort of like de- be, what I came to understand from reading a biography of Vivian Elliott, and some other things about her. And I found that this character really enjoyed quoting and playing around with other poems. And and that ended up being a really fun thing to do. It almost felt kind of musical to do, like playing a playing somebody else's riff in my own song. Um, and so I found it a really neat way to kind of feel a sense of connection to other writers. Um, feel like I'm doing something in my own little way. I'm getting to I'm getting to play around with the same art form that others have for thousands of years now, and um, what came out of that in the collection of poems? Maybe it's all one long poem. I still don't really know. It's just it's a book length. It's poetry that is the length of a book, and it all seems to me to hang together. And what I found helpful was to try to let the other people's words show, so that it's not just about not plagiarizing, although I believe that's important, but helping to kind of let the poetry show that there's a there are other voices here that are helping to make up this whole poem. They're in harmony here. Um, and for me, that sends a really helpful message about poetry, or at least what I believe about it. That you know, I'm I am getting to do this work, this play, this thing that means so much to me, together with poets across the world now, and going back through history. And that's There's something empowering and affirming in that. It's not about the popularity of what I do. It's about getting to kind of be a part of this really neat thing, this ancient thing. And so for me, intertextuality really does that. And Aliki Barnstone, a poet, a teacher of mine who helped me a lot, really helped me with intertextuality when she said about this book-length manuscript of mine called Vivian's Recovery, uh, that it wasn't meant to appropriate Vivian Elliott's voice, but to mourn her silence. And for me, that really helps me to kind of look at what I enjoy doing with bringing other voices into my poetry, because um, it shows that my voice isn't the only one, in this poem. Um, so I hope that makes sense. It's a concept that is still sort of, my mind kind of picks it up and lets it go. Maybe does or doesn't understand it, but it sure has helped me to talk to you about it. So thank you.